this video is called Working with the Media. Now, several years ago, media used to be newspaper, radio, and television, and that was it. But now, of course, since the internet has become so big, and now with social media and bloggers, anybody can be a member of the media. So some media have unique needs, but they all want several things, and that is the facts: who, what, when, where, why, and how. They also all want a quick response to their questions. They're going to want access to your scene, and they're going to want interviews with people, not necessarily your spokesperson either, people who can be part of their story. Of course, they're going to want video, audio, and pictures, whatever medium they work with, because everyone now is posting to the web as well as their traditional platform. They all want respect for their deadlines, but most importantly, they all want to be first with the big story. Now, just like you, media are also affected by disasters. So when information is coming out rapidly and changing quickly, they're going to still need verification. And keep in mind that they're competing with each other. Of course, they're based on market shares and advertising sales. So often their peers can be their adversaries as well. They also, at the local level, can sometimes be dominated by national media who come in and take over their story. Another challenge that media face, especially in a disaster where time is of the essence, is they might have a lack of expertise, so you may have to fill in a little more of the information gaps for them. They won't have time to do their research. There also may be a real lack of information that leads to speculation, and we saw this played out on the air during 9/11, when not much was known about what had happened, and yet anchors were expected to be filling time with information. So there was a lot of speculation about what type of aircraft these might have been, what caused them to explode, and so forth. So what can you do to help media meet their needs and then still utilize them to get your information out to the public? Well, the most important thing you can do, of course, is to build relationships with them before the crisis occurs. And you can do that by being proactive, by going out and meeting them at their place of business, maybe having a meeting with their staff to talk about some of the issues that your organization faces, or some of the anticipated disasters that may occur and how you would handle those. You can also stay current on the changing faces among the media. The Springfield market in particular is constantly turning over with young reporters who are moving up into larger markets. So get to know them. Study, practice, and evaluate yourself. Make sure that you're staying at the top of your craft. The other thing you can do to help the media and help yourself is to be prepared. We talked a lot about the communication plan in our last session, but it's so essential that you build those key messages ahead of time. Anticipate what could go wrong. Think about the questions that people are going to ask, and then start building those key messages to answer those questions. Remember, you want to choose 3 main key points with 3 supporting facts for each of them. And these should answer who, what, when, where, why, and how. They should answer what the public wants to know. You might remember from your reading, too, Dr. Vincent Cavello's 3-9-27 rule. And that is 3 key points, 27 words, delivered in 9 seconds. So when you have these key messages developed, you're ready to respond to any media call that might come along. You also need to be prepared for the media to be at your scene, because they will be coming. Local, national, and even international media will converge nowadays on a story that may have significance. They'll come in anticipation of that. So plan ahead for media onslaught. You can always scale back your response and your preparations. One thing you'll definitely want to do is set up either a credentialing or a check-in process, and that will help you to track the media that are on the scene and also follow up with them throughout the course of the event and then even afterwards. Definitely establish a staging area. This is a central focal point for all media to check in, to get updates, and to utilize equipment, electricity, and so forth. If you can, it would be great to provide amenities like restrooms, food, and shelter, electrical outlets, and phones. During the sniper shootings in the D.C. area, that was not provided to the media, and so after camping out for several days on the street, they brought in their own catering trucks and their own porta-johns. So it's not required of you, but it certainly goes a long way into the goodwill and partnership of working with media. And then, of course, don't forget to feed the beast. So feed the media information. They need facts. They need access to the spokesperson. They're going to need people, pictures, and sound. They're going to need background and additional materials, and they're going to want to know the location of the Joint Information Center, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, as the Public Information Officer, what are your first key steps in working with the media? Well, the first thing you need to do is check in at the Emergency Operations Center with the Incident Command staff. You'll want to assess the situation yourself, develop the initial statement, develop your key messages, and schedule your first press briefing. You'll want to communicate that information among the EOC staff and with your partners, and then go ahead and send out your media advisory. That introduces you to the media, lets them know who you are, what your role is in this particular emergency response, and and how they can get a hold of you through various phone numbers, cell phone numbers, email, etc. You'll also want to let them know what the press briefing schedule is and where they can also get more information. If you're updating information on your website or your social media sites, be sure and provide that to the media as well. And then the next step you want to do is start asking your peers for help. You should have already built relationships with the public information officers that work in your community, and whether or not they're involved in this particular disaster, they can definitely support you and come in and help with message consistency, research, media relations, and a number of other tasks. So that all can be done through something you've probably heard of called the Joint Information System, or the JIS. Now, the JIS is basically just a network of public information officers working together to deliver accurate, timely information to the public. So it can be as simple as 2 public information officers having a phone call, or it can be as complex as 150 public information officers working in a fixed location. It's a very scalable system. Of course, the benefits of working with the Joint Information System are to share information so that you can ensure what's released is accurate. It's also, a benefit is also sharing resources. So when I worked in the Springfield Greene County Health Department, often we would have public information officers from all over the city come in to help out. During the ice storm, we had someone from the school system, city government, even the zoo, there to help us manage public information. Remember, 2 heads are better than 1, and having those multiple trained public information officers to help you is going to be very valuable. So who's in charge in a joint information system? Well, it's really a cooperative effort. It mirrors the incident command system, so whoever is the lead agency in the disaster response itself would be the lead in the JIC as well. So if it's a public health issue, your health department public information officer would be the lead PIO. If it's a fire incident, your fire department PIO would be the lead. Each public information officer, though, is responsible for his own agency's message. That always remains under their control. Now, what's the difference between a joint information system and a joint information center? Well, basically, the Joint Information Center is just a physical location that enhances or facilitates the Joint Information System. So it's a central working facility where PIOs can work together, providing a one-stop shop, basically, for the media. Now, another powerful tool for you in the early stages of a disaster response is going to be the press briefing. And that can come in very handy when time is of the essence, when you don't have the ability or the time to do individual interviews. Definitely when there's a disaster that has community-wide impact and a number of agencies are involved, and when it's of interest to all different types of media. So it's especially important that all media hear the same thing at the same time. Now, where should you hold your press briefings? Well, they should be at a fixed location near the Emergency Operations Center so that your speakers have easy access, but not within the Emergency Operations Center where they disrupt work that's going on there. As a public information officer, it will be your responsibility to establish the press briefing area, and you'll want to pick an environment that you can control. So that means that in the best case scenario, you would have it indoors, away from distractions. You would ensure a clear backdrop so there's no distractions for the speaker, and you would want to make sure that cameras have a clear line of sight to the speakers in front of them. It's also going to be very important that you have a clear entrance and exit for your speakers so that once the press conference is over, they can quickly exit the room without getting barraged by additional media questions. And if you have the ability to use a mult box, that would be an excellent resource. That's a tool that different agencies can plug their sound equipment into so that all sound is filtered through one microphone to the mult box, and you don't have what we call the microphone octopus up on the podium disrupting the view of the speaker. Now, working within the Joint Information System, you'll work with your public information partners to determine who will be speakers and to identify what the goal and the key messages are for this particular press briefing. Remember, you only want to give people 3 new pieces of information, so sometimes you do have to prioritize what is the most important information to be presented at the press briefing and what can be presented later in follow-up materials. You'll also want to make sure that you brief your spokespersons before they go out to do the briefing, so let them know what the anticipated questions are going to be. Talk about what the goal of the briefing is and what your 3 main points are. Make sure you discuss with them the order of the speakers and who will introduce whom as they go through the speaking process. And then there's something that I like to call the dance, which is how you brief them about how to field questions from the media. What we don't want to see is an empty microphone, or we don't want to see someone caught at the microphone when a question is directed that's not in their role of expertise, and I call that the deer in the headlights look. So it's really important that whoever is at the microphone either step back and allow someone else to say next question please, or say next question please, and then wait for someone behind them to say I will field that question, and then they step to the microphone and the other person steps back. It's sort of like a triangle. Now, before the press briefing, it's really important as the public information officer to anticipate what difficult questions might come up and have answers prepared for those. You also want to develop your key messages using the 3927 rule, and you might want to create extra handouts or press kits, especially include a page that has the name of the speakers, their titles, and the correct spelling of their names so that your press conference is not slowed down by people spelling their names on camera. And then also make sure that you do practice with your spokesperson for your agency. Now, after the press briefing, immediately after it's over and the speakers have left the room, it's very important for the public information officer to thank the media and gather up any of their unanswered questions so that you can follow up with them later or at the next briefing. You'll also want to be sure and let them know when the next briefing is scheduled and where they can get more information that you're posting online or on your social media sites. After the press conference is over, be sure that you send a summary of it by press release in case there was an agency that wasn't represented. You'll also want to post that information on your website and social media sites. Be sure to follow up on any questions that came up, and then guess what? You start the next cycle for the next press briefing. Now, as a public information officer, you'll also want to prepare for individual interviews, and it's really important when you're doing this that you know your media and that you think about the local, state, and national events that are going on around you. I was caught myself in a situation where I had a very busy day at work and was called by a media doing a story for Sweeps Week on lead. And I did know this particular reporter. She was an investigative reporter, but didn't really stop to take the time to think, why is she doing a story on lead? Because nothing was going on nationally or even statewide that I was aware of. So being busy, I had my nurse do the interview with our PAT key messages that we always do to talk about lead, talking about how lead can be found in old paint and how it's dangerous for children under 6, etc., etc. And imagine my surprise when during Sweeps Week there was a big story called Poison in the Playgrounds. Lead paint on playground equipment is poisoning our children. So, yeah, I took a lot of heat for that, and rightly so, because I should have done my homework and stopped to think, who is doing the interview? Who else is being interviewed? And these are your rights as a public information officer to ask these questions of the reporter. What will we specifically be talking about, and what's the story that you're going for here? Some of your other rights are to select the interview location and set the interview length. And this is really important, especially during a disaster response, because you are focused primarily as a response agency on dealing with a disaster. And so interviews need to be just as short as they need to be just so you can get back to your work. You also have the right to decline to answer a question or to decline an interview, but always be sure that if you do decline, you provide information in another way, either by sending a statement or sending a fact sheet that they can distribute to their audience. Don't just leave them hanging. It's also important to remember as a public information officer that you're always on the record. You're always on camera. Any information that's gathered can be released. Oftentimes, reporters and cameramen will roll the camera and pretend as if or act as if they're just gathering background information, but anything you say can be used. So remember, you're always on the record, you're always on camera. You're also in charge of the interview or in control of the interview. So by using the bridging statements that we discussed in our reading this week, you can turn any question back to your key message. You're also responsible for how you look. It's your responsibility to make sure that you have a good on-camera presence, or that your spokesperson does, that you're wearing clothing that's appropriate to the situation. It's not distracting in any way, or it's not too casual or too non-casual. But always remember also to be professional and courteous, no matter what. Avoid the tricks and traps that media will do. Some of the things they'll try is to buddy up to you and just chit-chat. Meanwhile, the camera may be rolling. Another thing they'll do is, after you've answered a question, they may just wait. And in that silence, many of us are often tempted to babble or to continue talking beyond our key message. So you can just simply say, "Do you have any other questions for me?" They may also ask you a question multiple times. Sometimes this is not a trick. It's just the way that you delivered your answer the first time maybe wasn't as smooth as the media was expecting, so they're giving you another opportunity to say your key message again. So if you feel like you're being asked the same question twice, go ahead and give your key message again. If you're asked the same question a third time, it's perfectly okay to say, "I believe I've already answered that question. Do you have any other questions?" Another trick they may use is asking sensational or unrelated questions, and a nice bridging statement would be, "What's important for us to talk about here today is," and then finish up with your key message. Don't fall trap to personal attacks or requests for speculation, and don't repeat any incorrect information that they may provide. One way you can handle that is to say, "Your words are blah blah blah. What I'm here to tell you is," and then deliver your key message. Remember, the media are not the enemy. They may be like an alligator. You don't have to like them, you don't have to love them, but you do have to feed them. But you can build rapport and work together to get good information out to the public. So introduce yourself early, build that relationship. When the disaster does occur, make sure that you're available, that you're organizing interviews and briefings for them in a timely fashion, that you're anticipating problems. Above all else, be fair and stay on message. And that concludes our video presentation.